Okay, we are back. I'm very excited to have on the Goldstein on Gelt show Miranda Marquit. She's a financial journalist. She talks about taxes. In fact, you've probably seen her in Forbes or the U.S. News and World Report. Maybe even more likely, if you have seen Miranda with me on the Money Tree Investment Podcast. So for Miranda and me, this is kind of strange to be talking out of context on the Goldstein on Gelt show. How are you feeling about that, Miranda?
I don't know. I have some mixed feelings about this, Doug. We don't have the other people here to keep it safe.
Miranda does a lot more than just talk about financial things. As a financial writer, one of the things that I know you do is you really juggle a lot of things, because it's not like, a person has a job as a financial writer and you just spend all day writing about it. You're working with a lot of people, so you have a lot of cash flow issues. How do you deal with that from a kind of a personal finance point of view?
Yeah, so that's a little bit different because as a freelancer, as you mentioned, my monthly income is a little bit variable. I have been fortunate enough that I am a W-2 employee with a remote company now where I do a lot of my writing, Student Loan Hero. So I do have some stability now, which is nice. But for the better part of 12 years, I had basically just nothing but variable income. The big challenge there, of course, is that you want to make sure what's coming in can cover all of your expenses every month. And part of the problem you run into as well is sometimes you have clients that don't pay. I am actually in the process of trying to get $1,300 from a client who hasn't paid for 3 months.
Well, you tell him if he doesn't pay, that Doug Goldstein is coming after him.
That's right. And so...
Well, we can listen to it on today's show.
You're in big trouble, buddy. So that's kind of difficult because you have to plan for that. And one of the things I like to do is I like to figure my base expenses. What are the absolute base expenses that I have each month, my groceries, my insurance, my housing payment, all of that stuff, and figure out my average base expense for the month. And then when I have more than that, when more money than that comes in and my base expenses are covered, then I put the extra money into an account. And that way it kind of sits and it grows. And if I actually end up with a month, it hasn't happened yet, but if I end up with a month where my base expenses aren't covered by what comes in, then I can get into that account, get out the money, and cover it.
Do you see that as the same thing as an emergency fund, or is this different?
Yeah, I actually divide it up. I include my more traditional emergency fund contribution as part of my base expenses. It depends on where you're at in your career and how much you're making and how much above your base expenses you can expect on a regular basis. But I'm to the point now where I include things like my retirement contribution and my regular emergency fund contribution. I consider those base expenses. And so this is something separate. This is the going in, because this is sort of, I guess, my income fund. I don't know.
Well, income fund's a good word, actually.
Yeah.
So if let's say you spend $5,000 a month, and you don't necessarily make that every month, but one month you make $10,000, you could put that into an income fund and then kind of use that to flatten out your spending?
Yeah. It's just a way to kind of make sure that you're still taken care of. Another thing I do is I actually have a line of credit attached to my checking account. It's linked to my checking account. It's one of those things I got because as a freelancer, your money doesn't all come in at once. It comes in, you invoice everybody on the last day of the month, and then you spend the next 3 weeks waiting for stuff to come in. And sometimes it comes in the next day. Like one client will pay the next day, and then another client you'll get the money 5 days later, and then another client will get you the money a week later. And so it all comes in at different times, but that mortgage payment comes out on the same day every month.
Every day, right.
And it just happens that way. Your car insurance payment comes out on the same day every month. Your kids need to eat every single day. I mean, what is with that? So
You're a good mother.
I know, right? I feed my child. But
and what more could they ask for?
Exactly. So I have a line of credit that's attached to my checking account so that if a client is late paying, or if there's some sort of hang up in getting that transfer of funds between us, then it automatically shifts to this line of credit. And that way I don't end up with return fund fees, and I don't end up with missed payments, and it doesn't get all hassle. So that's another one of the backstops that I use.
Mm-hmm. So you have the line of credit, you have the income fund. We're we're just talking to Miranda Marquit, who's a financial journalist, also a co-panelist with me on the Money Tree Investment podcast. She talks a lot about money, about traveling. She teaches people all over the world through her own shows as well. And she's been talking to us a little bit about how to deal with month-to-month expenses if you have an irregular income flow. Another question that a lot of people are going to want to know, Miranda, when they are freelancers is if you're trying to really build up wealth and you're dealing with lines of credit and trying to get people to pay you for the work that you've actually done, how do you build up a retirement fund?
Yeah, so I just make it part of one of the things that I do. I have an IRA, and every month money goes into it. And it can be hard to do when you're first starting out freelancing and you don't have a lot of money beyond, trying to make rent. But it is important to set aside that money and to say, okay, I am going to set aside X amount of dollars each month for retirement and have it automatically deducted from my checking account and put into my IRA. Or you might want to open a SEP IRA or a solo 401k. There are options out there for people who are self-employed.
Do you think people can save enough in an IRA, or they should also be just saving in a regular brokerage or bank account?
So it depends, when you start. As we all know, the earlier you start, the better. For me, I've done the calculations, actually saving, and I'm a confirmed indexer. For me, just because of when I started and how well the market's done and the assumptions that I make, which are on the conservative side for annualized returns, it's actually fine for me as long as I'm maxing out my Roth IRA each year. I will make my retirement goal. Now, of course, I have a 401k with my new company and they offer a match. And so I'm doing that as well just for extra gravy. But if you start in your 20s, then maxing out an IRA is probably going to be okay. I don't like to just rely on it, though. And I like to have I'm a big fan of diversifying your revenue sources and having, different baskets. And so
thinking about the baskets, let's go into what you said just a minute ago, just maybe in the last minute or two, because I know that you are probably the queen of indexing.
Oh, dear.
And you even called yourself something like that a moment ago. Why do you choose that for confirmed? You had a confirmation when you were 16 that Miranda Marquit does indexing. Why indexing?
Because over time, when you look at the historical data and you look at how it works out, broad-based index funds. And when I talk about my personal indexing, I'm talking about broad-based funds like an all-market fund or an S&P 500 fund or an all-world fund. And with those, you're getting the performance of the market as a whole or a very large swath of the market as a whole, which means as the rising tide is raising your boat along with everything else. You don't have
a boat?
Yeah, I wish. No, I don't actually wish because I like convenience, and a boat is very difficult to take care of. But yeah, so as you go over time, you don't have to try and beat the market. I don't care if I beat the market.
But you don't feel that people tell you, they say, hey, Miranda, you are in fact on the in. You speak to people, you speak publicly as well as you speak to people privately about the investment world. A lot of people must come to you and say, well, come on, don't you know a little better than the market?
I don't. The market is a fickle thing, and I don't think that I need to try to beat it. And it's not in my makeup to have to try and beat it. I'm not this person who's like, I have to beat the market, and that's a medal that I can wear. To me, I look at, what is going to be sufficient for my lifestyle goals. And indexing is more than sufficient for that. And that's why I like it, because I don't have to worry about whether I'm picking the right stocks, doing the individual stock picking. I don't have to worry about whether I've done the right thing, whether I've picked the right stock, whether, it's going to, tank like that. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there are ups and downs in the market, but over any 25-year period, the market has not lost. So the market as a whole has never lost out. And so eventually over time, the indexing should pay off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. I also tell people, because they say, Doug, you're a financial advisor and you know what to do, don't you? And I kind of laugh because I tell them that most of my money is handled by institutional money managers, and they generally trade index funds just like you do. Miranda, you actually covered a lot of different points, and unfortunately, we are out of time today. But if people want to learn more about you and the work you're doing, what's the best way for them to follow you?
You can find me at plantingmoneyseeds.com, where I write about home business, investing, and planning your personal finances around your life goals.
Okay, we will put a link to that at the show notes of today's show at goldsteinongelt.com. Miranda Marquit, thanks so much for coming.
Thank you, Doug.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.